Hi, everybody. This is Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Leket Israel Network. It is May 27th, 2018, the 13th day of Sivan, 5778. I'm recording this now from the Judean Hills, from my home in Ephrata in the Judean Hills. It is hopefully the start of a beautiful week. Just a few hours ago, Staff Sergeant Ronen Luborsky, Hashem Yikom Damo, was buried in Jerusalem on Mount Herzl. He died of overwhelming head wounds that he suffered when a terrorist threw a marble slab down at him as his other soldiers were in Ramallah a few days ago, searching for terrorists who devastate all of our lives. And he never recovered from the head injury, and he passed away over Shabbat. So sending condolences, which is such a lame word, to his family, and a tremendous thanks to all of our security forces who work day and night so that we can live normal lives here in Israel, in this crazy part of the world, but all over the world, where, again, there are so many people who are trying to disrupt everything that is good. And so people pay the price, and Ronen Luborsky and his family are the ones who did this time. And you know, it's like, yes, rocks can kill and marble slabs can kill. It's just now 17 years since my niece's baby was killed when he was 5 months old, Yehuda Shoham, by rock thrown through the windshield. So it doesn't have to be missiles, and it doesn't have to be grandstand weapons. It can be something simple in the hands of people who want to use it to hurt others. And that's what we're up against on all kinds of different levels. So that's not a great start to this week. But I ended last week on Friday with like a personal goal. There's an organization. There's actually a town here where I live in Gush Etzion called Gvaot. And there's a school in that town that is just for kids and young adults with all kinds of different disabilities. And the entire town is around that school. Everybody who lives in this town has something to do with the school. Like, for example, the synagogue in the town, the Gabbai, I guess you would say, the guy who's responsible for everything that's going on in the synagogue, has Down syndrome. And it's just that kind of town. It's that kind of place. It's a wonderful school. And one of the mothers years ago, and I interviewed her a couple of years ago, Vivian Glasser, one of the mothers decided that she wanted to do something to help raise money for the school so that they could have, like, they built a kitchen. So now the kids make cookies, and they have a little coffee shop, and they sell the cookies. Very often when I'm with tourists, I'll go there, we'll buy the cookies, and then we'll bring the cookies to soldiers. So it's just like win all the way around. And so every year what they do is they do a swim. Some of you might remember this. They do a swim for women in the Kinneret, and we raise money by swimming. So I did it a few years ago. The last time I did it a couple, 2-3 times, and it was like 3.5 kilometers, and I was exhausted by the end. And I just said, that's it. I can't do it. It's too hard for me. So I stopped doing it for a couple of years. And then this year I thought, you know, and this was like a mindset switch. Why does it have to be all or nothing? Because there's a long route and there's a shorter route. I said, I can still do this. I'll just do the shorter route, which is about 2 kilometers, which is also not a small amount of exercise. So I went swimming. I've been swimming, and I trained, and I ended up doing this with my oldest daughter. She did the long route. I did the shorter route, and I did it on Friday, and it was great. I wasn't even wiped out. I thought to myself, I could have gone longer. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful feeling on Friday morning early to be swimming in the Kinneret, in the Sea of Galilee, wondering like what's below me, right? Like what's under the water that I don't know if I was the only person thinking that, possibly. Like what, you know, and this lake, this sea has seen so much history. And when I did the backstrokes, I was looking at the Golan Heights and thinking about what's going on in the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. And when I was doing the breaststroke or the crawl and facing forward, I was looking towards Tiberias and just the beautiful communities all around. And just, you know, I love water. I love being immersed in the water, in the open water, with hundreds of other women who were doing something that was bigger than ourselves. You know, like we were challenging ourselves, but we were doing it in order to help people who for every single day is a physical challenge. And it was just a wonderful feeling. And that's how I ended the week. And I did feel really good about that. And I think that that's just all that we can do. Everybody just challenge themselves every single day to make the world a better place, to do things for ourselves, but try and do things for others as well. And that way we keep Hashem in the world, and we keep his faith in us, that all this craziness that's going on and it will end well. So the bulk of today's show I actually taped a few days ago. I dragged nothing too, big for you guys. I went to Renana on a broiling hot day. Renana's outside of Tel Aviv, and just, oh my God, not the beautiful weather that we have here in the hills. But I went to Leket. I went to Israel's food bank and interviewed the head of it, Joseph Gitler, who is really such an inspirational guy. So that's the bulk of today's show. And I just want to end with the prayers for Ephraim Yakir, Ben, Rachel, Dvora, the little son, friends of ours, who is going to get better from the liver cancer that he has. He is. And there's so many good things and so many prayers that are being said for him, and just changing the world on like big level. All these prayers are doing good things. So enjoy the show. I will be back next week. I missed last week not talking, but it was Shavuot. So Shavuot took precedence, and I hope that whoever celebrated Shavuot had a meaningful holiday. I did as well. It was really very, very special. I was in Jerusalem, and I was at the Kotel. I was at the Western Wall, like when the sun came up, and that was a really beautiful experience. So just enjoying life, enjoying every single day, and I hope you are as well. Write to me, eve@thelandofisrael.com. Always love hearing from you guys. Still have a few days open for my next trip to North America, end of October, beginning of November. So happy to come by your community if you need me. Take care, everybody. Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Shavuot Tov. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the interview. Hi, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. Finally in an air-conditioned office, because it's got to be like over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, I'm sitting with Joseph Gitler, who's the founder of Leket Israel. So first of all, thanks for taking time to meet with me today.
My pleasure. Always great to be here and to have the opportunity to let people know what we're doing.
Okay, so Leket, what does Leket mean?
So Leket is a biblical term. There were a couple of terms in the Bible, and it's especially auspicious time of the year, as we know, just having finished the Shavuot holiday and the story of the book of Ruth. And Leket is the commandment on farmers to allow the poor to glean in their fields. I'm sure people remember that. You may remember how farmers had to leave a portion of their fields for the poor. And what Leket is a modern adaptation of that ancient biblical precept based on today's Western food economy, which is very, very different, unimaginable, I would say, to the times of the Bible. Today we waste with abandon. Those of us who are fortunate, living in the West, tremendous amounts of waste. And we have taken the opportunity to say, we can't allow that waste. We need to figure out ways using modern technology, modern trucking, volunteerism, and make sure that instead of allowing food to go to waste, to get it to people who need it, which even in today's modern, powerful, strong state of Israel is still a necessity.
So I think it's that you took the words right out of my mouth. That's the exact reason I'm down here this week, because you read the book of Ruth as we did on Shavuot. And really it's like, don't be greedy, farmers. The stuff that falls, leave for other people. But I think it's important to say that during those times, that wasn't such an easy thing to do, because people ate what they grew or bartered for, and there certainly wasn't the gluttony or the abundance of food like we have today. So when it comes to social justice, I think that one of the things that the Bible that still carries on today in the so-called Western world that we live in, this is one of the huge messages that the Bible's giving us here, is take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. Don't take advantage of them, take care of them, and that's what shows what kind of society you live in. So you and I know that Israel is like this. We live here, we see people doing good deeds all the time, but this already is something on a really big scale. It's not just like giving cookies to soldiers or the things that I do all the time. A little bit about you, Joseph Gitler. How did you start this? Where did this whole thing come from?
Okay, so I've been in Israel for 18 years. I came 2 weeks before the Intifada started in September 2000. It's a unknowingly difficult time. We weren't expecting that when we came.
From where?
We came from New York. My wife is from Toronto, which were the two places that you mentioned earlier when we were talking. Right. I'm looking for some Israelis. And here, yes, it's a New York-Toronto combo. And we came to Ra'anana, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv. and we've been living here 18 years in a wonderful Anglo-Saxon religious community. I'm very, very fortunate to be here, and our kids, they don't know any different, but they are very happy with the lives they have here. We came to Israel like, I want to say the many, but it's actually the few people who do make that decision to come, and we want more. So there's my plug for those listening to please come to Israel. Please make Aliyah to Israel. Come up. We need you. And I went to law school in the States. I worked as a lawyer briefly. I worked in high tech here for a few years. And then after a couple of years here, I was surprised to see all the poverty that existed in Israel. Meaning, and those who are listening in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, in the English-speaking, wealthy world, I'm sad to report we are very much the same here. A successful country that we can all be proud of. It is incredible what we've accomplished here economically, but like other capitalist societies, there are people who are just left behind. Some are left behind, and we know Israel's a tricky place. Some have been left behind because they've chosen not to work. Others have been left behind because they are coming from complicated communities. But putting those communities, the ultra-Orthodox, the Arab communities, aside for a moment, we still have hundreds of thousands of Israelis working in certain professions where the pay is just low and the cost of living has grown, whether it be housing, whether it be food. And those listening, this shouldn't be something new to them, because this is exactly what's going on in the West, especially in the United States, where you hear people saying, I work full-time in fast food, I work full-time in retail, I work full-time in security, and yet I need help from a soup kitchen, from a Meals on Wheels program, from a shelter, and that is what's happening here.
So I think also, and this very much speaks to the people listening, because Israel is part of the Western world, there are, as the years go on, certain jobs that are becoming redundant. As everything becomes more high-tech and robots, that means people are going out of work. Just on the way here, and I'm taping this on Tuesday before the show comes out, I was listening to somebody talking about and this has nothing to do with food, but having to do with the deal, the money that Israel's supposed to get for security and for weaponry, etc., which has to be spent in the United States. It was part of the deal that was signed with Obama. But what that means is that there's companies here in Israel then that are going to have to put people out of work because the money has to be spent in America. So there was somebody who was on who's got 100 workers, very, very specific thing that they make for a very specific military vehicle. And these people who are highly skilled workers and earning good money and the company's doing well could find themselves out of work in just a few months. So I think also any of us who are secure, and most of us, I would imagine, work and make a decent living, this could happen to any of us at any time. And I think we also need to understand that. People also get sick or divorced, or somebody dies unexpectedly, and all of us could find ourselves being on the other side. We all want to be givers, and at any time, any of us could find ourselves also getting. And so first of all, I think it's like every time I'm able to give, and Leket is one of the places my husband and I give to, I'm grateful that I can give. And I think all of us, everyone listening, needs to say like, whoa, we need to help those who need help now. And who knows, one day I might be on that side. And it's wonderful to know that things like this exist.
I couldn't agree more. And that, I think certainly what propelled me to do this work was hearing the real hard up cases. But what we don't realize is the line is so thin and so narrow. It can happen so quickly. As you mentioned, a disease that people don't always understand, that can knock someone out of the workforce and take their spouse along who's trying to take care of them. So of course, what Leket is really looking for is how do we help people who have a future, but while not neglecting those, the elderly, the disabled, youth at risk, the types who can't help themselves and may never be able to help themselves. So we always have to find that middle ground. We don't want to be accused of perpetuating poverty, but there's an understanding that some people, despite their best efforts, and I think this is, one of the things that people are concerned about currently in the U.S., where there's a big push in lowering food stamps, in forcing recipients to go to work. A lot of recipients would love to work, or are working, and they just aren't earning enough money. And that's the scary part for people like myself who see people earning 5,000 shekels a month, a family of four. It's impossible to live that way. And so what Leket's goal in many ways is, and we'll talk about what we actually do, but in many ways what our goal is to give the poor food which saves them money that they can then use on something else. It's just a redistribution of wealth from companies and people who have food who for some reason aren't going to be able to utilize it, whether to eat it or to sell it. So instead of letting that go to waste, we can rescue that food for pennies on the dollar. And if I can give a family 1,000, 2,000 shekels worth of food a month, that's money they would have had to spend. You need to eat. And they can then reuse that. And the same goes for the agencies that we serve, our charitable partners, which is how we distribute the food. Many of them will tell us, you've replaced 75% of our food expenditures. Okay, what are you going to do with that? Oh, we're going to buy each kid in our after-school club for kids their own laptop. We're going to take them on a trip. We're going to pay for their driving lessons. We're going to, whatever it is, that's the impact that we see very often from our work. So it's not, again, no one's starving. I wouldn't want anyone to leave this podcast and say, oh my God, the starving people of Israel. No, no, no. We have nutritional insecurity, people skipping meals, people maybe not eating the right food, but thankfully no one is starving, but people need help. The same way in the US and Canada, no one's starving in those countries either. But they may be eating wrong. They may, as we know, the poor are often obese. Yeah. And in the countries we live in, I'll say a Yiddish word, that's just a shanda. Right. Okay? It's an unacceptable place to be. And that's why we have to keep on growing and keep on feeding more people high quality food that before we existed was just going to waste.
So you're not giving out donuts here. You're actually giving out fruits and vegetables, which I have to say, as a tour guide, as someone who's lived here for 30 years, if you haven't been to Israel and tasted the tomatoes in Israel or the fruit here in Israel, aside from coming here for every other reason in the book, the fruits and vegetables, when I leave the country, I physically suffer from not having the fruits and vegetables, and here I see it out here. So let's back up a second. So you decide you're here, you're in high, you have a secure job, and you're looking around and you're saying, there's something off here. There's too many poor people in this country. What can I do to help? So how's this whole idea born?
Okay, so really, for me, I was disturbed by there's so many poor people. How could they be earning so little money? This is insufferable. And I started to look around and see, in a country which has such an incredible nonprofit sector, are there pieces of the puzzle missing? And I was shocked, and I still am to this day, to learn that we really didn't have one central organization, what would be called, outside of Israel, a food bank, whose real mission, keeping their blinders on, is accessing sources of food that are readily available for the taking. They just need someone to focus their energies. So as I visited all these agencies around the country, and I asked them, what are you missing? And of course, money, volunteers, all of them would say to me, we're not getting donations of food. Everyone knows Israel wastes like other Western countries. Well, why aren't you getting? I'm taking care of battered women. I don't have time to deal with that. I'm taking care of Holocaust survivors. I'm dealing with the homeless. I'm dealing with youth at risk. That's not my job. My job is to rehabilitate, to educate. We need someone who's going to focus their energies on just figuring out the logistics of getting this food from those who have it and delivering it to those who need it.
So I think that what's interesting here that other countries in the West, people listening from other countries may not understand is Israel is at a very interesting transitional place right now, where we're like in the process of moving from a more socialized country to a more open economy like other countries have. And you even see it with the idea of like the kibbutzim and a lot of these places that used to really run on socialism. A lot of them are changing over these last couple of decades. And so I know that like when I made Aliyah 30 years ago, a lot of people would say to me, well, the government is going to take care care of it, right? You need a school built, you need a synagogue built, you need something done. There's going to be a government ministry that's going to take care of it. And what's happened here, and I don't know about you, but I think that this is a key piece that people from the West bring in here, even though there's certainly, as you mentioned, not as many of us here as should be, is that we know that we come from countries where the government's not taking care of things like that. It's more of a private initiatives. And we can come here and maybe fill in some of these gaps with our experience in the countries we lived in. If you wanted a day school or you wanted a synagogue or something in our hometowns, the communities had to put it up because there was no government agency to fill it in. And I think that maybe here, and this is some of the unique aspect that we have now given to Israeli society, speaking as a Westerner who comes here, as you did, not from religious persecution and definitely not from economic deprivation. We've got this little, no, you got to do it yourself kind of thing. And this is how we can make Israel be a better place. I mean, I'm seeing in your face, this is part of what motivated you as well.
Yeah, certainly I agree. And I've actually written about this a few times. Based on our numbers in Israel, the amount of leading charitable organizations that have been started by immigrants to Israel is way off the charts. Okay? And I think in some ways it does come from that. It also comes from Zionism and coming here and maybe sometimes being a little naive in our expectations and therefore saying, oh my God, I can't believe this doesn't exist in Israel. So that was a little bit of my story. I often say that, like, we are here today because of Joseph Gitler's naivete. If I understood that Israel is an incredibly successful Western country and we should be proud of that, I might just have stayed in high tech, but it was, we should be really proud of that, but because we have greater dreams, let's see what we can do about this. So yes, I've seen that time and time again, and you are right. When I've done or gotten involved in other organizations where Israelis, we come, those of us who come from a religious background in the U.S., separation of church and state. You want to go to religious school, show me the money. That's the way you got to do it. You got to find the money, you got to build the institutions, and all Jewish institutions that we grew up with in the United States were all funded by the community. Okay, and certainly that's a major point of discussion. Here, you don't need that. My kids go to religious public schools, religious public high schools. You have socialized medical care, which is something tremendous, and hopefully the U.S. will get its act together one day and find a way to do something similar. And so, yeah, when I'm on the board of our local hospital here, when you try to fundraise for the hospital, people look at you like you're out of your mind. Don't my taxes pay for that? And that's a reaction that you get here very, very often, but less so when you get out of those areas that people are familiar with. So when you're talking about social services, when you're talking about mental health, when you're talking about disability, their people in Israel are willing to come forward and volunteer their time. The volunteer spirit here is absolutely staggering. And you saw when we were touring, before we started the interview, when you're touring the warehouse, so you had Israeli soldiers who are, by the way, already volunteering.
That's true.
And now they're volunteering again. Okay, and then you have, we have tens of thousands of corporate employees and school kids coming through the fields to pick excess fruits and vegetables, come to our warehouse to pack up those fruits and vegetables, go out at night in their own cars and pick up extra food from catered events. And everyone's working in concert together with tens of thousands of overseas volunteers, whether it be bar and bat mitzvahs, whether it be evangelical Christian groups who are coming, whether it be many, many thousands of birthright kids a year, all coming in concert to work together and help us with our staff figure out how to get the food and, again, bring it to those who need it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about volunteering and something like this is the giver feels better, I think, than the people who received it. It's something that you cannot put a price tag on, what it feels like to do something for other people. And this is how we build a nation. This is how we build a country. This is how we really build a just society. If you want to use the overused term tikkun olam, fixing the world, you can do it one head of cabbage at a time. So you get this idea, and what do? You run to corporations, you go to a farmer that you know. How do you, I mean, this is a huge logistical issue. I'm looking out here on these enormous warehouses, and all these trucks in and out. what do you do? How do you do this physically? Like, where's your background to do this?
Okay, so no background in fundraising or logistics or charity. I think if you, for those who are listening who come from a business background, very often all that stuff it's nice to be educated. Certainly having a good Western education is helpful, and I'm not complaining about that. Honored to have had many, many years of expensive private school education, and thank my parents for all their hard work to make that a reality. But in life, very often success just comes from doing. And, my first steps were to start calling up caterers and say to them, I know you have leftover food. I've seen it. What are you doing with it? We feed the staff. Maybe some of the family might take a little bit home, and then we throw it out because that's the way things are done. And then, would you be willing to give it to me to help take care of the needy? And no one said to me, what about my health risk? If the food goes bad, what kind of tax deduction can I get? It was just, we know there's a problem. We know there's people who could eat it. Come on down.
Well, so you mentioned a health risk, though. So is that an issue? Because Israel being a Western country, there are standards. I mean, say you take, I don't know, some kind of tuna salad from somebody, and it was a little off, nobody knew, and somebody gets sick, or, can somebody get sued? Like, we still are living in that kind of society. How do you do that? Because that's what we hear all the time. Like, I even hear that a lot of the stamps on food, in terms of expiration, are way earlier than that food is really going to expire, even dairy products. It's just kind of, nobody wants to get sued, everyone's hedging their bets, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of food gets thrown out. So how do you get around that, though, when you come from a legal background? So you couldn't have been unaware that this was an issue.
Right, and I come from an American legal background. America is the most litigious country in the world. So part of this is cultural. Israel is just different. I could see it from those first conversations. In addition, the health ministry, which we spent a lot of time in the beginning, said to us, we're comfortable with your work procedures, train your volunteers, teach them what to take, what not to take, buy refrigerated trucks. So we really work like a food company. The difference is we're not manufacturers, so we sort of fall through the cracks a little bit in the government's treatment of us. But because of that, we go above and beyond, and we're very, very careful. And up until this day and time, things have gone well for us for 15 years. Wow. And then let's not forget, the human senses are the best at ferreting it out. Yes. When it tastes bad, when it smells bad, it is bad.
Unless you're dealing with someone in the early months of her pregnancy, in which case everything smells bad and everything tastes bad. So that's just a suggestion that I would give you. Just because someone in that situation was in my house over the weekend and it was like, couldn't eat anything because it's all off. But that's the exception. So now you've got your suppliers, you've got some of the caterers. How do you go about distributing? You can't just stand on a street corner and start giving out food.
Well, you could, but we didn't. Yeah. We made a decision from day one to take the typical food bank model, which is distributing food through an existing network of organizations. Very typical. In addition, we decided from day one that when we were of sufficient size and scope, that we would be national. We wanted to make sure the food was spread from Eilat to Metula and parts in between. And we also made the decision from day one that we were a non-sectarian, non-religious, non-whatever organization, meaning we work with all types of Israelis, Jewish and non-Jewish, Muslim and Christian, refugee, etc., where they are, in the way they need to be worked with, to the best of our abilities, logistically and otherwise. What I mean by otherwise is when we're dealing with the ultra-Orthodox and we have food that would be good for them because of the way they keep kosher, we will do our best within our logistical framework to give them that food. When we have food that is not kosher and we know it doesn't have wine in it, which is a particular concern to religious Muslims, let's try to give it to them. When we have kids and we have chicken schnitzel and we know that's something kids really like, we'll give it to them. Again, everything within the parameters of our work procedures. And I'm very happy that today we work with over 200 agencies who feed over 200,000 needy Israelis on a daily basis. We don't provide all their food needs, but it can be very, very substantial amount of food within what they are doing.
So a question, because you are in the land of Israel and there are certain laws, I'm not sure all my listeners are familiar with it, when it comes to picking fruits and vegetables, like, you have to tithe and there's certain restrictions in terms that the rabbinate insists on. So do you comply with that, or only if it's going to Jews, or how does that work? Or you come into fields where they're already doing that on another part of the field, you don't have to worry about it. I'm talking about, for those who know, the ma'asot and things like that according to Jewish law you have to take. Also not picking from fields until the fruit is more than 3 years old. There's a lot of actually very beautiful laws that have to do with the land of Israel.
So we do our best to comply with it. It's actually much simpler than we thought. We work with rabbis from certain yeshivot to make sure, again, we're not a religious organization, but we want to make sure that and I think that's one of the accomplishments of the state of Israel, okay, and something we struggle with at times, but overall works generally well, is that we want to make sure that everyone's coming. And by the way, I want to add to this, all the Jewish organizations or the organizations in Jewish communities that we deal with are all kosher. Mm-hmm. Even if their clientele could care less about kosher, right, but are Jewish, because in case someone who cares about kosher ends up in their homeless shelter, in their mm-hmm. they keep kosher. Same way the Israeli army. The Israeli army is the number one food donor to Leket. Okay, really? We'll get over 1 million meals this year because the Israeli army, as a government institution, I assume some of the listeners here might be more conservative and therefore might be concerned about government institutions, and you would be not surprised that the army wastes a lot of food because
you're preparing for a lot of soldiers and not everybody's cleaning their plate.
Some justified, sometimes unjustified, but it's just the way the catering world works. And so we have a top-down agreement with the Israeli army. We are the exclusive partners of the army wherever they are, and when we have the financial and logistical capability to get there, to make sure that the excess food doesn't go to waste. And the army is thrilled with this, because if you ask any soldier will tell you, if you say to them, tell me about food in the army, some, depending where they served, what unit they were in, might say the food was good, some might say the food was okay, some might say the food was bad, but they'll all tell you the same thing: the waste was shocking. Right. And it bothers them. And citizens of Israel, when they hear this, say they feel good, because it's a circle. It's your tax dollars paying for that food. It's going to waste. We need to feed our soldiers well, and we want to make sure they have enough to eat. So it's no question we're always going to have excess. How great is it now that there's some organization that's making sure that food is now feeding our future, our kids, our elderly, whomever they may be. So completing that circle is something really, really spectacular.
How did you do that? How did you get to the army?
Well, in the beginning, it was more me just literally going to the entrance of an army base and saying, can you call the head chef? And that was very much done on the sly. Mm-hmm. I call that, in football terms, an end run. Okay. And then it took a few years really of negotiating with the army to say, we know this is an issue, let's figure it out. And actually the army, because they're sort of a world on their own, mm-hmm. And create their own laws in many ways, with them it really was much more Americanesque. Negotiating, signing a contract, putting levels of safety procedures in, not just food safety, but also who can come into the army bases. Look, we have army bases to this day where we still don't come in. We get there, we give them the containers, they drive it to the kitchen, pack it, and bring it out. All good. The only problem with us is we're all about speed. And so when things take too long, it means we need to give up other mm-hmm. potential pickups. But that's life. And so we have trucks all over, working at bases really all over the country, getting this food. And just the same thing with the hotel industry, the catering industry, the restaurant industry.
Right. And on the other side of the spectrum, so we're now into Ramadan, which is the Muslim holiday where they don't eat all day, and then they have like a fest from sunrise and sunset. And I feel bad for them. It's so hot outside right now. I don't know. They don't eat or drink all day. And I'm walking around looking at Muslims going, I feel terrible for them. Like, I hate fasting anyway, but we've got maximum one day. I don't know how they do this. And this year it really fell out in a heat wave. So I would imagine that what you're sending over to that sector is also like consider, in terms of like you're not having salads show up in the middle of the day when they can't get it. You're considerate of their schedule and their holidays?
Yes, we have an agency relations department who's charged with understanding the agencies we work with, seeing what their needs are in particular times of the year. Certainly now in Ramadan, I would certainly guess and know from past experience that we will ramp up the amount of food we're distributing. It's not only because of need, it also can be the time of the year. Let's be frank, if you're in Israel, you'd think there are only poor people before Passover and before Rosh Hashanah. But if you're in need, you're in need all the time. But that being said, we understand that there are extra pressures around the holidays, and we'll do our best to try to give food around the holidays in greater. So I know that now with Ramadan, that we are going to give extra food to the Muslim community. I mean, you were complaining about here. I was listening the other day to a podcast and they were talking about, just like we have with our rabbis, you have religious leaders, and talking about how do Muslims look, do they look at it as originalists, like this is how it was done in the time of Muhammad? Right. Or, as an example, Israel's hot. What about in Norway, where it's light 22 hours a day now, and therefore you can only have one meal? Or do the imams or the religious leaders say, no, you do it like you were living in Mecca? And it was a fascinating discussion, felt very much close to home to someone who grew up in religious and studying the Talmud. It was the exact same thing, like things that were written in a different place in a different time, and what people for a month are going to fast 22, they'll die. You could literally, that could kill you. Right. At least there it's not so hot. Right. So it was a fascinating. So we really try as much as we can to respect the cultures we're dealing with and educate them. I mean, one of the classic stories we talk about here was when we first delivered eggplants to an Ethiopian charity here, taking care of Ethiopian Jews. They did not know what it was. Wow. It was not part of their culture. So Israel doesn't have food deserts, which is a term you might not be familiar with, but it's something that we used to hear about a lot in the States. It's where you could go to certain, especially urban areas, and you could literally not find fruits and vegetables for sale. I grew up in northern Manhattan, and in those days in Harlem and northern Manhattan, they used to say, it's a food desert. What did that mean? You would go, they only had these little bodegas, little supermarkets, and you could buy as many types of potato chips as you wanted and beer, okay, but there were no fresh fruits and vegetables, canned goods you might get. In Israel, that's a non-issue, but what we do have here are certain communities that have come from different places and they just aren't familiar. Now, they don't have to buy this stuff, but Leket, as a rescue organization, we don't always know what we're getting. And so when we show up with crops that they may be unfamiliar with, we really want them to eat it. It's not Western imperialism. It's not telling people what they have to eat. It's not, by the way, from the beginning of our discussion, we're not against junk food per se, but I have a limited budget, and you bet I'm going to make that decision if I can pick up a truckload of potato chips or a truckload of cola or a truckload of tomatoes, eggplants, and kohlrabi. And for those who don't know what that is, you can look it up in Google. Right. Yeah, I'm going to use your money, right? You said you're a donor, so thank you for that. I'm going to use that money to try to give people healthful food. As I always say to the junk food proprietors, and I couldn't fall asleep last night. At 12:30, I was eating ice cream, okay? So I do it the best of them. But you can bet that I say to them, we would love that food. Please deliver it. I can't spend money on that. If I had an unlimited budget, sure. But let's be frank. As I always say to people, even Bill Gates doesn't have an unlimited budget. Everyone is making decisions. So Leket has to be thoughtful with our limited funds, and we have to make sure that we're getting the highest quality food to those who need it.
Okay, so you went to the army and you went to different caterers, but how about the fields? How about the farmers? What is it like in Israel? You just have farmers, or you have more cooperations, co-ops, or you have kibbutzim? How did you actually get to what I see out here anyway? Seems to be the bulk of what you're doing right now, the fresh produce.
Right, so produce is massive. I've heard from different people at times that this is the largest gleaning operation anywhere in the world. Okay, we're going to do this year, we hope, about 20 to 25,000 kilos, which is about 50 million pounds of fruits and vegetables. Sorry, 20 to 25 million kilos, which is about 50 million pounds of fruits and vegetables. High quality, grade A, grade B. I'll explain a little bit in a moment. It started actually, I knew it, I wanted it. I knew it was available. We just needed to do it. There was actually a pastor who pushed me when he met me many years ago in Baltimore. He was doing similar type of work in Virginia, and that's where the headquarters is, and throughout the U.S., and said, when are you going to do gleaning in the Holy Land? Now, for an evangelical, that was just like, oh my God, you know. He pushed, and he said, you guys have to do it. And I said, you're right, we're just so busy with cooked food, we haven't gotten to it, we know it's there. And of course, came back with a head of steam, like I always do, and just looked, really, I started by going, happens to be where we're sitting right now. We are surrounded by orange orchards, so I didn't go there. But I knew from bike rides that I had done that Ra'anana, which has become very developed over the years, still has a lot of agricultural surrounding it, as does this whole area of the country. For now, we'll see what the future holds. Right. And I knew there were some big potato packing plants, sweet potato, and I just drove my car there, knocked on the door and said, here's what I'm doing. Do you have sweet potatoes? Potatoes that are just going to waste. And they would say to me, yeah, mostly we're giving it to cows. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how about giving it to humans? Would that be possible? And they said, sure. Listen, they said, it may not be in the best condition. It's yours. We'll put it in a corner for you. You can pick it up and take it as is. You can bring volunteers. And that's what we just started to do. That was the beginning. Bringing volunteers who would go through these large crates and the stuff. And there was some stuff that was horrendous. Went to the cows because animals, thank God bless them. Eat anything? They really will almost eat anything. It's unbelievable. And then the stuff that was in better shape, we started to introduce that to our distribution network. And then the week of Hanukkah, about 12 years ago, we had a call from a farmer who said, I grow persimmons. We know them as Sharon fruit, some people, a farsimon in Hebrew. We've had a hailstorm. They're on the ground. And the way the persimmon society works is once it falls off the tree, avocados are similar. We don't know what kind of damage might have happened, even if they look good. We go to our insurance company, we get whatever we can, okay? And then we started to bring in volunteers there, a few hundred volunteers that first week. And then we started to hear other stories, and we started to market what we wanted to do. And we started to get youth groups and birthright groups. And then we said, wait a second, this isn't good enough. We need more than volunteers. We need our own paid staff. And we started to hire Israeli Arab women to work for us full time. And we have 15 women like that who work for Leket full time, going to farms that are less centrally located. It's not so easy from day to day to find volunteers to go up to the Golan or to go to the Arava. But when that's their job, they go where they need to go. And so we've built up this enviable volunteer network. And you as a tour guide, yes, I have no doubt you've brought groups to volunteer with us.
And well, my son, when I told him I was coming down today, he goes, oh yeah, my company was there a few months ago. We had like a day, they call in Hebrew Yom Gibush. I don't even know how to begin to translate that. Like a to get everybody to work together and get to know each other out of the office. And he said, yeah, we were down there for a whole day picking things from, I don't even know what he was picking. He said it was great.
Yeah, probably. We do a lot of, most of our picking is vegetables. Farmers are more comfortable letting non-professionals because they know eventually they're just going to plow it over and replant. Trees are done here and there by volunteers, but primarily by our professional pickers, and the numbers are staggering. You're talking about hundreds of millions of portions a year being distributed to the poor. Great variety. I think we did about 75 different crops last year. It's seasonal. Israel's very seasonal, as you know. It's citrus fruits in the winter. It's vegetables throughout the year. We never get blueberries because they're too expensive. Here and there we'll get a little bit of strawberries. It really, it's a mix. And of course, it's all based on market forces. So it's acts of God, as we discussed, but it can be market price, bumper crop leading to lower prices, and therefore farmers deciding, can't make any money off of this. It can be sanctions on Russia, the ruble tanks, it becomes too expensive for Russians to import crops from Israel. It can be, we've had we had a recent story where we had a few containers full of watermelons that were actually being sold in Gaza, and because there is business, and there were a few containers, and then whatever it was, word got out, they're coming from Israel. The rulers said no more. That's what, so Leket is a scavenger. We're here to fill in the holes of these weird things that are going on in economics, because it's all economics. We always tell our farmers, if you can sell it and make money, please. That's not philanthropy to Leket. It can come from our food donors, but that's not what we're looking for. We are in the gleaning business. We're in the rescue business. Philanthropy to Leket, we hope the money to pay the bills should come from the government of the state of Israel, from different ministries.
Well, do you have corporations? Do you have corporate sponsors here who this is, because a lot of corporations now are saying we need to give, we're making a lot of money, we need to give back to the societies that we're living in. Do they come and sponsor some of the things happening here?
So we do get corporate sponsors along with the government, but the bulk of our funding is coming from private donors, both in Israel and overseas, primarily from the Jewish community, but also some really wonderful supporters in the pro-Israel Christian community who've been outstanding. We have one church, Shalom Israel, which is not just a church, it's a movement in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines, who've been tremendous supporters of ours in the millions of dollars over the years. And Pastor George, who runs the has been incredible and bringing people en masse. And of course, it's just hard work running this operation. Our budget is pretty substantial, about 50 million shekels this year. And we want to do more. And the reason we want to do more is we see the need and we see endless supply. And that's what keeps me up at night. It's the need and the supply. And because we're a leveraged organization, because we get all the food for free, on a 50 million shekel budget, we should bring in this year around 250 million shekels worth of food. So it's really a no-brainer in many ways. We're great for the environment, keeping food from going to waste. Huge volunteer spirit. Over 100 Israelis making a living for working for Leket, which is that's just another bonus that people love. And of course, feeding tens of thousands of needy Israelis literally every day. So it's really been a great run.
Win-win.
It's a multiple win-win. I'm always shocked. Every day when I wake up, I tell people, I can't believe where this has gotten to. Thank God for all the great partners along the way, the food partners, the financial partners, the employees of Leket who are so dedicated and wonderful. And we have a few employees who've been with us almost since day one. And I think it says something about the kind of operation we're running here, but never becoming lazy, always looking for how to be more efficient, because we understand at the end of the day, the money we're spending is donor money. And of course, being super ethical, that's unsaid.
You have nonprofit status if someone donates?
We have nonprofit status in Israel, in the US, Canada, the UK, France, Switzerland, Australia, and if you're for someplace else, we have partners who, depending on the size of the donation, are often willing to provide us with that tax deductible status. So we are, and we have a lot of donors around the world, a lot of cheerleaders, and I think overall we have a very, very good name, deserved, but we work very hard to keep that good name.
Do you have people from other countries that now come to see how you're doing this because they want to copy it and do it where they are?
So that's a great question. So Leket is the Israeli member of the Global Food Bank Network. I recently joined the board, and that organization is charged with helping developing, primarily sometimes developed countries, create food banking models. And because what we do is quite large and developed, we get a lot of people coming here, even sometimes, by the way, from very developed. We recently had the CEO of the Maryland Food Bank, whose warehouse is 20 times the size of this, coming to see what we do because we're doing things very aggressively and in a very large scope. So people want to see, especially in fruits and vegetables. In the developed world, people understand that's the future. Fruits and vegetables, people want that. It's available, and canned stuff, processed foods are becoming less interesting, and companies are getting more efficient. They're wasting less, and therefore they have less to give. And that was always the bread and butter of the food bank.
Squished strawberries become strawberry jam. So if you don't have so many squished strawberries, you have less strawberry jam.
Correct, and you have less mistakes, canned goods, where the label's upside down. It's just, stuff's happening. So they're looking for what's the next big thing to feed those in need, and we're really doing a very proficient job in those areas that are less established, even in the biggest food banks in North America.
Wow. So the light of Zion comes out in many, many different ways.
I hope so.
So a question that none of them are going to have to deal with. What did you do in the sabbatical year? 3 years ago, we had where you're supposed to, if we're going back to the Bible and Ruth, right? You're supposed to let the lands lie fallow. Some people sell their land. Some people don't pick. In other words, this is really supposed to be the social equalizer, that every 7 years there's not supposed to be any poor people because technically the fields are open for anyone. No one owns their land that year. So assuming that you've been through one, or I don't know, maybe two sabbatical cycles, how did that work for you?
Okay, so yes, we've been through two sabbatical cycles. It's been less of an issue than we would have expected. I'll explain for a few reasons. First off, the laws of Shemitah, which is the sabbatical year, only apply to Jews. And many, many of the big farmers in Israel are coming from the Arab community. So put that on the side, number one. Second, while each Shemitah cycle, more and more farmers are keeping it, it's still a minority of farmers. The reason being the rabbinate in Israel created a, as we used the term before, end run around Shemitah, kind of like when you sell your chametz or leavened bread before Passover, created a similar structure to that where actually Jewish farmers sell their fields to a non-Jew and then business as usual. So that's most farming. However, it is growing, and around 10% of Jewish farmers in the last Shemitah did keep that, and that does impact us. Now,
does it impact you better because technically you should be able to go and not just take the gleanings from the field, but even if you wanted the whole field, or it doesn't really work like that?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So what happens is people are growing vegetables, so they will plant like crazy right before the new year starts. Then they will pick that, and they're just done. What it means is you're not going to get that from them. If you were going to get anything, it would only be from that, and they're not going to do anything till after the next new year. So no, it does not help us necessarily. It can help us a little more in fruits, where depending on when it budded, and the laws are incredibly complicated, and I don't even know how many rabbis, frankly, really understand it either. But it's overall on us, the impact is minor. Who knows, when the temple comes back one day and we're doing it, it may change. But I always tell people is I've been blessed. I really feel like every day, whether it's exactly how the rabbis or God intended in the Bible, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. What we are doing is exactly what the point was. Okay?
The spirit of the Torah.
This is the exact adaptation of based on where the world is today, okay, of what we should be doing. Farmers don't need to leave a corner of their field because they're doing it anyway because of the way the modern economy works. And caterers don't need to cook for the poor because the way expectations have been set at weddings and at buffets is that there's gonna be extra. And that's, by the way, in our own homes as well. Okay, we just thankfully live in this crazy modern world where we've been so incredibly successful. By the way, who knows what will be in 500 years? We may, we're just living at the peak. Who knows what's going to be in the future? Okay, but we are living great, and our children will be okay. And I think but after that, who knows what's going to be? But at this point in time, if you think about what the spirit of the Bible was, if you read what those laws were, and if you understand, by the way, it's even better today because I went on Shavuot, I went to a great lecture given by a woman in our community, and she spoke, her topic was, what was it like to be a woman in the time of the Bible? How did you pay your bills? Why? Because she looked at Ruth and Naomi. And Ruth, pardon my French, was working her tuchus off in the fields, in the heat, day in, day out. There was no air conditioning as you were looking for to come back to. She was doing it not just for herself, she was doing it for her mother-in-law also. Wow.
Also an interesting story. Only mother-daughter-in-law relationship in the Bible.
Because if you, in those days, and this is what the lecture was about, if you didn't have a man, okay, you were, pardon my French, screwed. If you didn't have a man. And she went through, what could you do if you look through the Bible? She went through the entire Bible and tried to look for, what could you do if you were a woman and you didn't have an attachment to a man? And you were pretty limited, okay? And so the poor in those days really had to sweat it out. I'm not saying you don't have to sweat it out today, but what Leket isn't making the poor come. If you think, we're having the rich, quote unquote, come on their fun days, celebrating their bar mitzvahs. It's a very modern adaptation of volunteerism to help those in need. Why? Because the poor today, and the people lived in little towns, the poor today who are trying to make a living, they don't have time. Who has time? Someone who's working in some company, earning good money, and they need to make sure the employees are feeling good about things. And so everything is just a modern adaptation of something that was very hard in the Bible. Yes. People no one needs to leave Israel because they're going to starve like Abraham did, like Yaakov's kids had to do.
The famine that sends us down to Egypt.
Right? We are, thank God. Like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, and that's what people, and that's anyone listening to your podcast wants Israel the positive. This is Israel the positive. And that is what Leket is. We have this resource. It's going to waste. People aren't always able to keep up. Unfortunately, I wish it was different. It isn't. Let's make sure they are taken care of properly.
Wow, that's amazing. Could you have imagined when you made Aliyah that this is what you'd be doing now? It's like
No way. And no way on multiple levels. No way that I'd be doing this kind of work, A. And doubly no way that it would be this substantial an operation. Okay, I am my late father used to always say, Joseph, you're a legend in your own mind. Okay, but no way. I might have thought that, but I never thought that we would create this incredibly large operation. And of course, it's me, but it's not just me. It's me and our partners, our tens of thousands of volunteers a year, our tens of thousands of financial donors a year, are incredibly dedicated. Everyone's working together for a goal, and when you're working together for a goal, you can ascend the heights.
Amazing. And the fact that there's a Joseph who's still worrying about feeding people, a little biblical there too.
Yes, it's certainly, you know, they say in Hebrew, I'll say in Hebrew, and I'll translate, Kishmohu Kainhu, like his name he is. You know, I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest believer, but, you know, in my case, it's worked out nicely. I'm certainly engaged in similar type of work that my namesake, I mean, I'm named after my grandfather, unfortunately, but my ancestral namesake, you know, but hopefully the difference will be that we won't have those fallow years. We'll only go from strength to strength. Let the fallow be not in the provision of food, but in those who need it. Them running out, us not having them. Hopefully that will be where we end up one day. So would we like to go out of business? Sure, but I'd rather go out of business because there's no poor people to feed as opposed to us running out of food.
Right, absolutely. Okay, Joseph Gitler, the founder and head of Leket Israel. What's the website if anybody's interested, wants to book a time to come here, wants to be a part of this great enterprise?
So please come, please volunteer, please donate. We will put your work, your funds to the best use that we can. Our website is www.leket.org. We have a website which is which has a lot of information. People can really learn a lot about Leket. And certainly if you want to be in touch with me or with us, info at leket.org. Don't be shy. There's no question we will not answer. And there is almost no request that we will try our best to have you come and volunteer and support our work. So please get in touch, and thank you for listening today.
So thank you so much, Joseph Gitler, for sharing your time with me here at Leket Israel. It's really been an honor to come here.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Okay. All right, everybody, that is it for this show. You can always write to me, eve@thelandofisrael.com. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and have a great week. Goodbye for now.
This week on Inside Israel Today, we have Saul Singer, the author of Startup Nation, the book that tells people around the world why Israel is such a big success.
Many countries want to work with Israel, and it's a positive story. It's Israel making a difference.